Hey guys, I wanted to bring a brand new series to the channel, which is question and answer. So every single month I'll make one of these specific videos. Feel free to put your questions down below in this video and I'll answer them next month or when I make a post on the channel. It could be anything from questions about videos, questions about current topics within sports or non-sports cards, etc. And yeah, so we got a decent amount of questions for this first episode. I'm really happy about it. And I'll do the best of my ability to answer each of these questions. We'll put it on the screen right now. Our first question, and then jump right through it. So, what is the best rookie class for each music era, or are they split among the years pretty evenly? Most interested in rock or metal side is bands like Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, Sabbath, to Metallica, Marilyn Manson, and Slipknot. I think the 90s and 2000s are hugely overlooked music cards. I just bought the Slipknot 10th anniversary box set for the cards that came out with it, trying to decide whether to submit for grading or not. All right, so first, I don't fully believe in the term for rookie cards for non-sports. It's a lot more black and white when you go into sports cards, but non-sports cards, there's a ton of stuff that just really isn't documented. People don't agree on the years, whether kind of like historians within rock cards or the grading companies. That's a scenario for another day. And also like what's considered a card, right? You talk about like gum wrappers, or do you consider like something that has to be pack pulled, or does it come in set, or it's a sticker? There's so many variables on that side of things. So I just want to talk about just in general what I consider a card across every different era, and probably the easiest is to break it down by decade a little bit. Now I'm gonna say I'm gonna forget some bands, but I'm just gonna try to highlight a few of them. When I think about like 1950s era for music cards, right? You can think of things like Elvis or Buddy Holly, or you can think of, I think 59 has Johnny Cash. There's a few others in that set too. Chuck Berry's in that set. There's a few names that I'm skipping on top of my head, but feel free to dive into 1959 new music cards, but there's quite a lot in there. When you jump into the 60s, though, it's interesting because you do have kind of trade cards for different bands that different album companies or music companies started producing. A lot of that's just really not documented well online, and some of them are autographed only, so they go for quite a bit of money. It's an area that I still want to research quite a bit into because one, the grading companies don't have them in their pop reports, and B, I just find it kind of interesting. I'm actually in that dilemma right now when I'm building out the 1960s most valuable non-sports cards video, because I'm trying to do as much research on some early Beatles stuff. And the Beatles, the first Topps cards came out, 1964, but they have cards earlier than that, like all the way back to 1962 without the four classic members. Because if you know, Ringo was the last of the four Beatles members, but they had cards prior to Ringo joining the band, which is again a wrinkle of, what's considered a rookie card or not. You consider the classic lineup of the Beatles that have the first rookie card, or do you consider, the first card that has the Beatles term with the majority of the members? We're not going to go into that debate right now. But when you go think about the 60s, right, the two bands that really, really take over in the 60s, well, I should say three bands. Okay, I'm going to say four actually. So mid 60s, right, you have the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. That's right there. Then you jump into 68. There's the classic set of the Cantantes. Well, what's in Cantante, right? You have Jimi Hendrix in there as well as the Doors. And you still have a lot of other bigger names in there too, right? You have Cream, which has Eric Clapton, which a lot of people put, top 25 guitarists of all time. It influenced quite a few people. And that set is still loaded with other names that I'm not even mentioning. And you jump into the 70s. Well, kind of like a gap between 69 and 70, you have like the Hishler gum wrappers. And you have some bigger names in there, right? You have Led Zeppelin that's in that set. You also have Black Sabbath, which is in there. You have like the Vlinders as well, which I believe they're a part of Cigarettes, if I remember correctly. But those are also like, they were printed from the 60s through late 70s, maybe early 80s, if I have the years correctly. There's a lot of bands in those. You have to look up some documentation on dating, but you also have Black Sabbath in there. And then jumping into like 72, Panini Cantante, right? Again, you have Sabbath in there, you have Led Zeppelin for the early 70s. Then late 70s, there isn't as much cards produced. I know Panini had a few years, but then like in 79, you have Prince and ZZ Top. You'll have Talking Heads in that Universal set. Now, going into the 80s, you start getting a little bit more metal music, which I know this question kind of asked. So on the metal side of things, you have some early cards of Metallica as well as Iron Maiden throughout the mid 80s. And then jumping into the 90s, right? Probably the most collected cards out there are the Nirvana cards. people will spout, 1995 Panini is the Nirvana rookie, although they have probably 10 or 15 cards earlier than that that you could find across the world. Again, there's a lot of other bands that I'm forgetting. This is just on the spot. Additionally, right, when we were talking about like modern music, Slipknot does have an early set before the 10th anniversary box set. I do know that one of the subscribers on the channel actually had that all autographed at one point, but ended up selling it, which I think is kind of a classic set. Personally, I don't have those Slipknot cards, but I do want to get one of those box sets eventually. I don't know if PSA or SGC do grade it. Early 2000s also has a Coachella set out there. There's also one-off music sets that you'll occasionally find, but there's not a lot of rock and metal printed in the early 2000s. Unfortunately, a lot of the modern companies, Topps, Upper Deck, and stuff like that, kind of neglected printing out cards during that time period. I do hope that does change in the 2020s or early 2030s, but who knows where the future is on that side of things. I know this question was a bit, but let's jump into the next one, which is personal favorite non-sports topic to collect. Ooh, so there's two topics that I spend a lot of time on. First is music, which kind of why I put that question first, but the second side of things is kind of historical figures. I kind of have both passions on that side of things. Number one, music. I go to a ton of concerts, plus I play the guitar, so I do like that side of things. But then also on the historical side of things, I find history really, really interesting. And it's fun diving into different cultures as well. I don't only collect just American cards. I'll actually go overseas and collect cards from Europe, or I'll collect cards from Australia. Now, the main focus is American figures, but I also do collect figures from respective countries or continents when it's applicable. So I'd say number 1 and 2, probably historical figures, and then music in general. There's so many different subjects to collect. We'll cover another one in a bit. All right, how much time would you say you spend on check out my cards each week? That kind of varies. So some weeks I'll literally spend maybe 1 or 2 hours. But when I do add in a lot of cards, you are going to have to price those out. What's nice is you only technically have to price out cards once, so you can just go in there, price them all out, and they sit on your profile for quite a while. You don't have to ship them out. And what I will say is I'm about to partner with COMC for other videos here on the channel. So that includes, top COMC sales every single month across every account, as well as just basic tutorials, how to use COMC tips and tricks and different things like that. So, you can spend as much time as you want or as little time as you want on the platform. I used to spend a little bit more time doing a lot more flips on the platform, but I decided that I'm going to flip a lot more cards to COMC outside of the platform because I think it makes more sense on the time side of things, right? I can go to a card show, go through some bargain bins and buy some slabs and then enter them into my COMC account. There are a ton of deals on the platform, and you can definitely find ways to do that. And that's still where I spend probably my 1 to 2 hours, maybe a little bit more each week. But I've been spending a little bit more time on getting inventory off the platform and then adding it to my account. So hopefully that makes sense. Top 5 Gaudi Indian gum cards. And then there's a second question. Is 1966 Marvel the first release for Marvel? And then Mount Rushmore of non-sports. Example, Walt Disney, JFK, Hendrix, and Lucas. So I did a little bit of prep work for this question. So top 5 Gaudi Indian gum cards. So this is just me thinking on top of my head, right? I did no research on comps and stuff like that. So there could be some cards a little bit more higher. Initially, when I think of that set, I think there's probably about 10 or 15 cards that people really gravitate towards. So let's jump into them. First, pretty obvious one is going to be Buffalo Bill. People collect his cards all the way back from the 1880s, just an iconic figure. Also, you have Billy the Kid in there, which tends to be a pretty expensive card. Could be one of the earliest Billy the Kid cards. I don't think he's in anything that's a little bit earlier. Then on this side of things, right, you have some famous Indians on there. So you have like Geronimo and Sitting Bull. Again, people collect their cards in the 1880s, so it's still applicable to the set. It's a very famous Indian set. And then if I was going to think about number 5, maybe Daniel Boone, or I'd put maybe Pocahontas in that 5 spot. But regardless, those are some names pretty early on. Again, if there's enough interest, I'll make a video into it. But what I found on my channel is a lot of people don't watch the non-sports sets videos, unfortunately. I put a ton of time into research and everything like that, but they only get a couple hundred views. Okay, and the other thing is 1966 Marvel, the first release for Marvel. Personally, I don't collect superhero cards, so I couldn't tell you if that is the first Marvel. Some of those characters may have earlier cards in the 50s or 60s, especially because Japan made some superhero cards and things like that. So I can't tell you definitively if that is the first release from Marvel, but it's one of the earliest sets. And then the Mount Rushmore question was kind of interesting because I've been asked the Mount Rushmore question before, and there's so many different approaches that you could go. You could say like Mount Rushmore of cards or the Mount Rushmore of subject matter. Non-sports is so kind of segregated into different topics. You know, if you ask someone their Mount Rushmore of cards and they collect superheroes, they would name 4 superheroes. If you ask someone for historical figures, they'll tell you historical figures, right? Music, the same thing. Your list has a variety of names, so I wanted to kind of think of what my list would be. And this took a few revisions, right? So I have it right over here. I agree that Walt Disney needs to be on the Mount Rushmore. Not only are his characters sell quite a bit, right? If you look down to like a Mickey Mouse card, but even just the Walt solo cards and Walt cards just general, they sell a ton. There's a lot of collectors out there. 100% agree with that. You put JFK as kind of your president on this list. JFK does not sell as well as Abraham Lincoln. Without a doubt, the highest selling and the most selling president, the most liquid cards that I've ever had were Abraham Lincoln cards. Without a doubt, comps also back that up. So I'd put Abraham Lincoln for president. Number 2, president-wise, I'd probably put George Washington. They used to be about the same, Lincoln and Washington, but over the last year or so, Lincoln has really taken off, and there's a bigger gap now than there has been at any other time. Personally, I think Lincoln and Washington should be valued the same, but the market says otherwise. All right, next you put Hendrix. And looking at music cards, you know, I agree. Hendrix is probably that spot. Now, Hendrix does have some of those earlier trade cards before his like 68s, and they are quite expensive. He has some from 67, and you find those are anywhere from like $5,000 to $10,000. And you jump into some of his 68 cards, and in high grade, those are quite expensive as well. Some of the most expensive cards in the Panini Cantanti set. He has some really, really niche cards that just don't populate. They can sell for a couple $100 cards each. So yeah, 100% agree with putting Hendrix in that spot. Hendrix also has a lot of cards in the 70s, and I believe he has a few in the 80s. And the 4th spot on here, I know you put George Lucas, but I wanted to put a character in here because I feel like there's a lot of people that collect either like comic book characters or TV show characters, and I put Spider-Man or not Spider-Man, sorry. I put Superman. My honorable mention on that one would be kind of Spider-Man, just based off of how expensive his stuff goes for. But Superman, without a doubt. His gum cards from the 1940s, super expensive card 1 in 72, even based in that iconic set from Gum Inc. sell anywhere from $25 to $100 just based off the condition raw. He also has some earlier stuff and later stuff that there's a lot of Superman collectors that will really, really pay up for it. So that's kind of my Mount Rushmore. There's other names that I think easily could have made it. When I was thinking of like inventors and stuff like that, Edison and Einstein tend to sell really, really well. Probably put the edge right now on Edison. Also Franklin too, but I'll probably put the edge over Edison over the other names. But the market is rapidly evolving, so it's hard to say where it would be in a few years. Obviously, I talked a while about this, so let's jump into our next question. I'm interested in your opinion of 80s PSA 10s. It's really tough to still gem cards from that era. 100% agree with that. It's very, very tough. Grading standards have been applied differently 10 years ago versus today. People argue about that, but man, I look at cards all the time at shows. I look at cards at auction houses. Grading standards, they've changed quite a bit. Yes, there will be more added to the pop report. Yeah, there's definitely some stuff. They'll also get tensors, still an open packs and stuff like that, but not a ton. 100% agree. Is there a long-term value there, or are they overvalued? Just in general thoughts on PSA 10 for key 80s cards. I would say they're properly valued. I don't see there being a ton of upside just because there's a lot of them that are already graded. And I feel like a lot of people that want to have the 10s within the key iconic cards already have them. Now, could be wrong on that, sure. But I feel like the market has been adjusted. I think the cards are pretty flatline over the last year to 2 years on that side of things. So I don't see a ton of growth in that aspect. Could be wrong, but I think they're properly valued. I don't think they're undervalued. I don't think they're overvalued. All right. When you buy a card at a show or online, do you have a favorite grade you tend to focus on? And is there a specific grade where you feel you have the best bang for your buck? Okay, we'll answer that in a second. How much importance do you place on eye appeal versus technical grade? Thank you. All right, so let's talk about the first side of things, right? Do you have a favorite grade? My answer is going to be no. I collect a lot of stuff. Some stuff, right, I want to get in 8s, 9s, and 10s. Other stuff, I'm happy if I just find the card at all, because some of the cards that I'm chasing for, they haven't sold publicly in over 10 years. You know, if there's a 1 or if there's an 8, I will try to get that card because I just can't find it. There's other cards that I have not found one sale for or any, I don't know who owns the card. I only see an image online. I've been searching for years and years with no luck. For an example, there's an ACDC card, Nabisco from 1976 out of Australia. I'm putting this in the video because if you have any leads, I would love to buy that card. I've been looking for 5+ years for that card. Talked to a lot of people in Australia. I say a lot, probably anywhere from 5 to 10. No one has any leads on that card. And I search eBay, I search everywhere. I just can't find it, right? So whether I find that card in a 1 or a 10, that is a card I would want to put in my collection. Now, you talk about like the best bang for your buck. What I recommend on that side of things is kind of balancing the PSA pop report as well as the price scale. So what you'll see sometimes when I talk about this in like junk wax era or other type of stuff like vintage football or vintage baseball, right? There's tends to be a breaking point when your grading scale, when the prices just get crazy. So let's say, for example, a PSA 8 sells for $200, an 8.5 sells for $250, and then a 9 sells for $2,000. Well, if you want to have that card in a pretty good shape for the 8 or 8.5, do you really need to spend all that extra money to fight someone for their registry for the 9? So in that case, right, I would go for the 8.5. If you can't find an 8.5 because half grades can be tough, go for the 8. And let's say also in that case, right, a 7 sells for $150, the 8 sells for $200, and the 8.5 sells for $250 before it moves into the 9, which is a few $1,000s. I mean, if you're looking at a price difference of $50 or $100, I think personally it's better just to upgrade to where you can afford, right? And jump up 1.5 grades in this instance for $100 versus, you know, a few thousand to get another half grade bump. So look at it at a card by card basis. See where there's like a big breaking point in the price and see if it makes sense, right? Sometimes there's a big breaking point when there's just not many cards graded higher. Sometimes there isn't. You know, the market isn't going to always be correct, like where a breaking point should be on a specific card. And again, it just really depends on the card. And the second part is how much importance do you place on eye appeal versus technical grade? I do put a little bit more importance on eye appeal than anything else. Again, for like the cards that I collect, I do a lot of rarer cards. So I'm not too necessarily concerned on eye appeal or grade. I just want to try to find the card in itself. But there is a ton of instances where the eye appeal is nicer than the technical grade. And what I will tell people is you can always crack out a card too and send it into grade again. See, you know, let's say you have a card and you got it. It looks amazing as a 5. You know, grading is cheap. Crack it out, send it in, see if it gets a 5 again. If you think it's undergraded, go with that approach if you really care about the grade on the slab. If you don't and you just want to put in your PC, awesome. You just paid a little bit cheaper than a card that should have been graded like a 7 or 8. There's a lot of mistakes with grading, and I think you can find some great eye appeal versus technical grades out there. And there's the opposite, right? There's sides of things where things get 8s, 9s, or even 10s. You're like, how did it get that grade? You know, mistakes happen on both sides of the spectrum. All right, next question. Are you selling these? Just curious why you went with SGC. If so, do you have problems selling these as opposed to a PSA slab? And this is from our recent non-sports or just in general grading reveal with SGC. So SGC is kind of our preferred grader. So they are out of Florida, so it's easy for us to ship and different things like that. But additionally, I think they're pretty good with their grading on that side of things. Like, especially with stuff I've sent in, I look at the grades and come back. I'm like, all right, well, these make sense. So there's a lot less variance on the grades over there versus some of the other graders. What I will say is I've also had some pretty positive experiences with CGC. The only thing that I I kind of dislike with SGC is their willingness to slab stuff. I usually get anywhere from 10 to 20% of my order rejected because they don't want to grade some of the non-sports sets, which I don't really think is fair to the collecting perspective, right? There's sports collectors and there's non-sports collectors, and I think it's bad for the hobby if we reject different sets. CGC is a lot more willing to grade some of these other obscure sets from other countries across the world, and they also do a lot of research on that side of things. So I do send a lot of stuff to CGC as well. Not a ton of stuff, but I will send to them in general. Now you talk about the problem selling these as opposed to a PSA slab. Honestly, I've never had problems with selling SGC slabs. I've never had really people say, "Oh, that's SGC. I'm not gonna buy it." I know on the modern side of things, people will always say PSA, 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 and some people are opposed to SGC. At the end of the day, it's a card, right? Grading is just an opinion of someone, right? It's not perfect, and it's always going to be an opinion, right? Third party looks at a card. Oh, I think it's an 8. Assigns it an 8. You know, if two other people look at a card, you know, one may say it's a 7, one may say it's a 10, right? Grading is just another opinion based off the card. Although the hobby has assumed, okay, based off the grader's opinion, this is the value of the card. It's just a centralized way to do so. And yeah, that's it for Q&A episode 1. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to ask questions down below on this video. I'll also be making a post on the channel a little bit later this month or for the next episode, and I will catch you guys in another one.